All right, welcome everybody. Hope you all are having fun today. I did want to start off the session. My name is Chris Haugen. I am the moderator, so I wanted to put a face to the name that you may see in the chat here. Yeah, as Dan mentioned, the Docs tab should be showing up now that we've started the session, and we've got the webinar housekeeping slide on the screen there, so you should be able to see that. For any technical issues, put it in the chat, but hopefully this will help here. Otherwise, I will hand it over to Rebecca.
Thank you, Chris. Hello, team. I'm seeing some familiar names. Pratik, I see you dancing there. Welcome back. Let me start my screen share. So I did want to point out those documents that Chris mentioned. Go ahead and download those now. You're going to find a Power BI desktop file and let's see what else. We've got a PDF document there. And as I go through this skills lab today, this is the Power BI desktop file that you'll be able to download from those documents. It really has everything already done for you. So I'm going to be illuminating what's in this file and how did I arrive at the solution that I've put in there. So I don't want anyone to feel too stressed out about trying to follow every click stroke. This is a time when you can sit back and eat your snack or eat your lunch. If you're there sitting at noon o'clock and starving, that's all right. Just plan for your note taking to take note of any interesting tidbits that you want to try for yourself. Jot down what you might want to come back and watch again in the video when you are ready to sit down with your own data and start trying out some of the techniques that we're going to talk through today. So slide progression. There we go. So I'm Rebecca Sundquist, senior consultant, senior principal strategic consultant here at Blackbaud, and I'm talking to you now from Kansas City, Missouri. I've been working with fundraising data and technology for 21 years. My work anniversary always comes up right at BB Dev Days. And today we're going to be inside the Power BI desktop file. We're going to be looking at some DAX expressions that are helpful, especially focused on time series, time intelligence. And we will get to cover 3 of my favorite visualizations, gauge, bullet chart, and KPIs. We'll get to build those together because there are some pitfalls along the way, and I don't want you to hit those pitfalls and then give up. I'm going to help you get over those so that these can become meaningful visualizations in your work. And I'm going to cover other features along the way. We're going to take a little bit of a meandering path. As I said, the path will be a little bit meandering because whenever I am building up to something, it can take some trial and error or some trial and, well, that almost worked, but I got stuck, now what? And you'll see how I started off on a path and then said, let's find something better. And so we'll walk through that today. Just bear with me. Some more housekeeping items. If you do have Power BI Desktop open now to follow along, I want to point out that you may have some settings that are different from settings that I've chosen, which can give you a different experience. So let me cover those now. I just went to the file, and I'm going to options and settings, checking out the options. And what I'm interested in is whether or not you have a certain preview feature turned on. Here come my options. All right, I'm looking under preview features here, and I wanted to point out that I have chosen to turn off on object interaction. So this preview feature does give you a different user experience in how to edit and interact with visualizations on the report canvas. So if you start saying, Hey, Rebecca, my interface looks a little bit different than yours. It could be because of this preview feature being ticked on when I've chosen to turn it off. One other setting while we're here is time intelligence. I've chosen to turn off auto date time for new files. And then in my current file here, we have that same setting, just specifically on this PBIX file turned off, no auto date time. And that's because I have my own date time dimension, rather just a date dimension. And you'll see where that comes into play as we work through our session today. All right, I will pause for questions every 20 minutes is about how I've got this broken into thirds. And so as you have questions as I'm working along, go ahead and drop those into the Q&A tab. I might lose track of them if you're dropping questions into the chat. So please, the questions that you want me to address at those breaks, drop those into the Q&A so that we can keep track of them there. Thank you all. All right, I see the request to zoom in on my screen. Thank you for pointing that out. So I have already set this at 125%, but I do want this to be a good experience for everyone. So let me check out my settings one more time. And I know that it gets even smaller when we expand our panes to the right-hand side, but it's, these panes as they expand that are where I really want you to be able to see what's going on, and especially the expression bar up here. So if that is showing up too small, and thank you, Chris, for that tip to use the full screen option that is in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. That could help as well. But while we're here, I don't mind sharing as I go along to my settings. I think 150 is probably going to be a little big. And we can see that that's not actually helping us with the main view, because Power BI Desktop is always going to shrink this to fit in the view that's available. I'm going to drop it back down. Well, no, we'll try it. We'll give it a try. Because I know I've been in those classes where I just can't see the screen, and it's not conducive to learning. So here we go. So at the sacrifice of our report space here, we're at least able to see what we're interacting with in Power BI Desktop. And we can shrink this up to get a little bit bigger. Okay. So without further ado, let me talk a little bit about this PBIX file, which you can download now from the Docs tab inside of Goldcast. You've got this PBIX file and a PDF. As for the PDF, which looks like this, this just describes piece by piece how this workbook is put together and all the elements in it. But I'm not going to be walking through this document step by step, line by line. We're going to take a journey, and I want to use this time to illuminate why I made some decisions and what the features that I've included are really doing and how you can use them. What I want to mention about this PBIX file is that the data source behind this is actually using the Power BI connector, which is an open source connector. Our Blackbaud community contributes updates to it. It is not something that is owned by Blackbaud support, but I'm going to drop this connector into the path to this connector. It did not come out as a trying to drop it in. Paste as plain text. No. Let me try this again. Trying to There we go. This is only for your information about where the data came from. The connector itself, so what do I want to say? I'm using the connector to populate this data. The workbook, the PBIX file, contains all of the data. So you'll still be able to follow along and look at the DAX expressions that are in here and how everything's put together. If you are not using this connector, which is relying on data from the Razor's Edge NXT, then you won't be able to refresh this specific workbook. But if you do happen to use that connector and have that already set up, then you would be able to refresh this workbook with your organization's data. So that's kind of cool, but it does only work for a subset of our audience members today, and maybe that's a very small set. Don't be frustrated if you're not able to leverage this workbook to refresh. It's intended to have pieces of information that you can then go and build into your own workbook on your own data set. So, all right, let's talk about what we're here for today. The problem that I was trying to solve for was being able to compare this year to date to a prior year to date and get that percent difference. And so let's focus on these couple of columns here in my table for now. For fiscal year 2025, reporting through the last gift date, where the last gift date is May 23rd, I can now compare to May 23rd of the prior year and see that percent difference. Alternatively, if I was just looking at the end of the prior year, then of course there's a bigger difference there because I only have data through May 23rd this year, but I have full year data for the last year. When we're looking at this full year column for 24, comparing full year of 24 to 23 makes sense. That's great. But if I did want to do everything based on a May 23rd, this is what we're solving for here. One thing that I learned early on, and so this is more than a decade ago, this is not even in Power BI. This was just building, business intelligence dashboards for organizations. The last gift date that's in my data set didn't necessarily indicate that they had completed all their batch entry through that gift date. And so my users were always asking, well, can I just look at the end of the last month or the end of the last quarter where I know that my gift entry is solid and complete. So it's really truly comparable for this year versus last year. So that's where I introduced the concept of a dropdown that would let the end user choose a through date. So here we're looking at May 23rd, but we have that little understanding in the back of our minds that just because I have some gifts up through May 23rd doesn't mean I've completed my entries through May 23rd. Maybe I need to go back to the end of last month, so the end of April, and now we see that our current year counts dropped to count of donors through the end of April, and we're comparing to the end of April of the prior year. Or maybe I just want to look at the first quarter of the year to say, well, where were we as of the end of September? So this feature right here is what our presentation today is about, making this something that you can build into your reports and leverage. So I hope that that's a use case that has been itching in the back of your mind that you're looking forward to putting into place. But as I said, I'm going to take a little bit of a journey to get there, because if you were to start with a query, just asking the internet, how do I do a year-to-date comparison this year versus last year? The answer you're going to get back is to use an expression called total year-to-date. And that's a running year-to-date calculation. And so I wanted to start with that and see how far we can get with that suggestion. That's most often it's going to most often come up as you're asking the internet for help, right? So I've got a little template page in here that I like to duplicate when I'm getting started on a new page. And I'm going to call this one total year to date, because this is the example that we're working on here. Now, at this point, we're not ready to introduce this slicer because we haven't gotten that far yet. We're taking a journey to get there. So I'm removing that slicer from this page. And the next thing I'm going to do is start with a quick measure. Again, I'm saying let's get as much help as we can from asking the internet, what should I do? Total year to date, okay. Let's see what that really means. If I want to do a quick measure, I've got options for time intelligence and total, and the year-to-date total is one of those options. I'm going to expand out my data, and it's asking me what is the base value. That means what measure am I trying to get a running total of? We're going to focus on count donors in these examples. I'm trying to add count donors to my base value. There we go. When I clicked on it, I added it to the view. And then it asks for our date, and the date I'm going to use is our date dimension. So remember, I turned off auto date time. I have a date dimension table. And let me go over to this view to show you that it was really critical, first of all, that I marked this as a date table. And it has a couple of date values in it, but the field called date is indeed the unique key. And I have contiguous dates. You'll find that mentioned if you're trying to use a time intelligence expression and you don't have a proper date dimension. It will tell you that you need a table with contiguous dates. That means all of the dates between the first date referenced in your data set and the last. We need all the dates referenced, and that's how time intelligence calculations work. As we build up into this total year-to-date expression, we'll see how it takes context from that date dimension to determine running through when, right? So bear with me, here we go. Add a date. We're using the date field from our dim date, and now we're ready to add that expression. Here it is, count donors year to date. Wonderful, and it fell right under my measures table, which is where I want it. So this expression has been created for me now, total year to date, count donors, and we told it we're using our date dimension, date. That's going to be our contiguous date field. Let's adjust this visualization to a line chart. And we're not done yet. We've put count of donors on it, but what do we want to see them over? I want to see my count of donors by month and then color the lines by year, right? So these are date attributes that we can pull out of our date dimension. I'm going to put the fiscal year on the legend and my month name on my x-axis. Let's make this bigger now. Take a little look. Okay, we've got a lot of fiscal years in this data set. And right now we're counting donors at each of these month year points. What we wanted to see was a running total, and we have our running count donors year to date field available to us now. So let's put this on our chart instead. Uh-oh, what looks funny here? We're using a fiscal year, and our fiscal year runs from July to June. But what we see happening is our running total is starting in January and building up. So that tells us that there's something more we need to do in our total year to date. So that quick measure should have asked us, well, what is your fiscal year end date? Because there's another parameter we can add here. 6/30 is our fiscal year end date. When we add that, we see that we start counting in July and we're building up through the year. All right, but we're still a little busy here and I can't handle this much busyness. So let's go ahead and filter so that we're only showing the top 3 fiscal years. You can see fiscal year is already available here in the filter because it's something that we're displaying on the legend. I do not want to hand click which years we're including because next year I do not want to come in here and hand choose the next set of years, right? So I'm going to choose a filter type of top in and choose the top 3. But now it says by what data value? And what it's asking for is really a measure, something that can be aggregated. By what aggregation are we going to sort these years? Well, I know, and you know, I just want to sort it by the year number, right? Just sort it by the year number or call it alphabetical. I don't know, just sort it. But because it's requiring an aggregation, I have created an aggregation that is the max fiscal year number. You can see that expression here. It's just simply the max fiscal year number. And of course, for fiscal year 2025, the max fiscal year number is 2025. And for 2024 on, etc. Therefore, when I sort by max fiscal year number, I am getting just those top three. Now, if your date dimension includes dates going out into the future, then you might need another method. We'll address the fiscal year offset option later. Just bear with me for now. All right. So what we have learned about the year to date is that it is taking the context of these months that are placed on here. I've copied the table here because I copied the line chart so that I can turn it into a matrix and show you, the actual data values that are showing up here. And of course, this is small in the screen. So here, for any of these months, if I want to compare data through the end of April, I can click on April. I could use April in a slicer to choose April, and now I'm able to compare fiscal year 25 to 24 April. Let's say that I wanted to add a percent difference measure to this chart. There are a couple of ways to do that. One option right here on the chart, and this might be something that comes up if you ask the internet, now how do I do a percent difference when I have a chart like this? Or if you ask Copilot, Copilot might suggest you can add a new visual calculation. You can do a versus previous, so fiscal year 25 versus 24 and on backwards. I don't want to do that here because I know that I need this percent difference calculation to be available in multiple visualizations. Remember, we're going to build up to gauge and bullet chart and other options. So a visual calculation is not appropriate for me here. What I'm going to do instead is introduce the same period last year as an expression. So I can take that count of donors, and for fiscal year 25, I want to get that same time period calculated for the prior year. And once I have that available as a measure, then I'm able to do the difference, the percent difference there. So let's add a new measure. We're calling this one count donors year to date, prior year. And we're introducing the concept of the calculate function. So anyone who's spent any time in Power BI desktop has probably already encountered and become familiar with calculate, but if not, it is going to be your best friend, because what we can do here is wrap a new definition around an existing measure. So we know that we've got count donors year to date, but what I want to do is get this same calculation for the same period last year. Now, again, I have to tell it which date dimension I'm using. It's not necessary to mention the fiscal year because that's already part of our count donors year to date calculation. So inside the count donors year to date, we know we're doing a total year to date from July 1st through the context of what we've selected here through the end of April, for example. But now we're saying take that same range of dates, July 1st through the end of April, and back it up a year. I'm going to pop this into my view and also take off the fiscal year 23 because it's just too much for us right now. Let's just focus on 2 years to keep it simple for ourselves. Yeah, but these are fitting. Okay. Visualization, I want to take out my totals. So I'm formatting my visual to remove column subtotals, row subtotals, keep it simple. Now I compare fiscal year 25 to fiscal year 24 for the same period. And indeed, we see this 3590 is the same that was reported in April. We hover and we see that show up here. All right. With that, we're able to then create the percent difference calculation. New measure here. We're still working on count donors year to date, but this one is %diff. And I'm going to use the divide function here. Notice how the helper is telling us we'll put the numerator, comma, denominator, and then we can give an alternate result in case of errors, which in our case is going to be blanks, right? So for our numerator, we want the difference from this year minus last year. Now, again, I don't feel like you have to follow along with my typing here. I'm moving at a pace to keep us moving forward. I'm using these illustrations here to just illuminate some options that I considered before I settled on the final solution, right? All right, so what I'm doing here at the end, the alternate result is just going to be blank. And this is in my measures table. I'm very glad for that. I want it to display as a percentage, and I'm ready to add it to my table. So there we go. We're down 56% when we look at this year, 1556 compared to 3590. Now we've got some measures that we can use to further illuminate what we're reporting in our view, and these will come in handy later when we're ready to start building our gauges. So I want to pause for Q&A here. I'm going to pull up the screen here. I see no questions yet, folks, but now's the time. It's our first break for Q&A on the total year-to-date calculations. All right. So here's the trouble. We can do April. I'm going to go ahead and move on, but do feel free to add questions. We're not at the point of getting May 23rd compared to last year, May 23rd. But you can see that the context that's coming into play here is the date range that's related to what we're selecting up here above. When I select March, then it's through the end of March. When I select May, through the end of May. If I expanded this down to the day level, then I could select May 23rd. But is that really what I want to do? Not really. I don't want to have to put all of the days as options in front of people. And furthermore, what it really takes, what we can do, if you were to continue down this path and continue asking the internet, you will find additional suggestions for taking this year to date and then adding additional criteria into a calculate statement that says, well, filter my date dimension where the month is less than May. And if the month is May, then only keep the values up through May 23rd. That can be done, but I don't like the effort that goes into coding the month less than May or month equals May and day less than. It's just, we're getting to be a lot of work. Let's think again about what we had on our first page. With the concept here is we've got the fiscal month and the day that's important in that that filter. But instead of having that complication of separating out the month and the day, I want to treat them together by saying July is the first month of the fiscal year. And so I'm going to give that the value of 100. And then I'll add units for each day in July. 101 is July 1st, 131 is July 31st. And that's where I came up with the concept for this selector on the right-hand side here. And let's see if we can get the data a little bit bigger if I go to my selector and my data display. All right. So I have the concept now that if my user is interacting and my user chooses July, then what they want to see is all of the dates that have a fiscal month-day combo that is less than 200. You know, anything between 101 and 131 counts as July. So this is why I'm using 200 as the value I'm going to evaluate against. When the user chooses July, then keep all of the date values that qualify with this fiscal month day value that's less than 200. Let me show you what that looks like in the date dimension. Here we've got July 8th, August 8th, September 8th. Scroll over to the field that I've added called fiscal MMDD, and we've got 108, 208, 308 to represent what day of what fiscal month. All I've done here is simplify the very common solution that you'll see out there that says, make sure that my month is either completely less than the month I care about, or if it is the month I care about, then that the day is less than, or within the range of days in that month. I've combined those together to make it much simpler to do this comparison. Now, what if they select last gift date? Well, we know that we have gifts through May 23rd. And so May 23rd is the 11th month, 11th fiscal month. And we want to include all of the dates up to 11/23. So what I'm doing here is a calculation, which we'll get to. We're going to dig into it and get down to the very specific calculations here. But right now it's about the concept. I've added 1 to that case. If they select last gift date, then the day we're comparing to is fiscal month 11, day 24, 11/24. So if my date has a fiscal MMDD, month day value that's less than 11/24, it counts. So that's going to apply across the board here in our selected year-to-date business rules. All right, and we talked about those rules. Now it's time to talk about what is this full year and selected year to date that I've got on my visualization, on my matrix. Within each of those, you see the same measures repeated: count donors prior year, count donors difference year over year. Now remember, these were here when we opened the book. These are not the measures that I was creating earlier using the total year to date. These are just your straight up count donors measure, which I pulled up initially. Simply distinct count of gift constituent ID, who gave a gift. But we see it repeated under these 2 different labels. So let's take a look at our visualization to unpack those labels. What we have on the column here is a time intelligence group. So I'm introducing the concept of calculation groups. This is a new type of measure. It's a calculation group. It's its own thing. Within that calculation group, you see that there is something that I'm able to use as a column that's called time intelligence. And when we open it up, let me get this in our filters. Take a look at the values that are available in time intelligence. I've actually got 3 values available, but I've chosen to include 2 here, the fiscal year and the selected year to date. So what is a calculation group and how is it operating like a column? I've defined fiscal year, selected year date, and total year to date as 3 different items within this group, and each of those items is a business rule. So rather than being a physical value that's in a column, it's a business rule that says when the user chooses to display selected year to date, wrap this rule around the measures that are showing up. Remember, the measures showing up in our case: count donors prior year, count donors, percent diff year over year. All of those are wrapped in the business rule that says, check what the user selected. If they selected July, then include all dates prior to 200. If they selected last gift date, include all dates prior to 11/24. That calculation group is applying the business rule. And now's the time when I go and show you how to do that. All right. We're going over to the model view. And of course, we've got our standard tables view where we can see all of our measures and we can set their properties. and fields, measures and fields. But in the model view, this is where we can expand our calculation groups. I've got a couple of groups here. Hopefully we'll have time to mention gift type group also while we're at it. I created a new group. Of course, drop down to create a new group, right? I added, it comes automatically with this item, or pardon me, I don't even know what it's called. It's the column name. So I named it Time Intelligence. And then we can add items to it. So each of these items is that definition that I was describing to you. Let's take a look at the definition for the full year item within this calculation group. Full year equals selected measure. That's it. That means when the user selects count donors, then display count donors. When the user selects sum revenue or total amount, then display that. Don't apply any additional qualifications or filters or business rules around the selected measure. Just display the selected measure. And then selected year to date. We talked through this rule, right? We said we're able to identify what the user selected as the MMDD value. And our business rule is that we're going to calculate the selected measure, which might be count donors, might be total amount. We're going to calculate that only where the date dimensions fiscal MMDD is less than, moving things around, is less than our user's selected MMDD. So I hope that it's not too confusing with the MMDD concept. That's why I tried to set us up for success by talking about that to some extent. But at the most basic level, we have a calculation item here now that's applying this rule. Whenever we pull selected year to date into either a filter or even onto the column of our matrix, that business rule is now being applied. All right, let me just check for questions at this point. Y'all, I see some chat going on, but not too many questions in the Q, not any questions in the Q&A yet. I do see that question about after BB Dev Days, where can you ask for help? And our Blackbaud community is the answer there. Chris, I don't know if you know how to get into that community to really drop that link in here. I can come back and try to get that link at the end if we haven't done that yet. But it's I think the Sky Developer discussion group is the one that handles. Oh, thanks, Dan. Thanks, Dan. You got my back. All right, guys. It's good to see you. Hi, Sunshine. Yeah, definitely. Bring your questions to our Power BI user group. So we meet every second Wednesday of the month. We should have one, I think. I haven't checked with Eric if we're still on for the month of June. Thank you, Dan. Alrighty. Let's do a little comparison now with the selected year to date and total year to date. In the presentation that that's available for you to download, I mean the Power BI desktop workbook that's available for you to download, there is a page that does this comparison for you. On the left-hand side, I have that running total again, but instead of using the total year to date, we're using the concept of this selector for through date. So in both cases, the running total for year to date required those contiguous dates, and it required context of through when, and our date dimension was providing that context. And here we can even use the date dimension or as a slicer. When I click on March, I'm comparing data through March. In the other visual, you'll see these values look a little bit different because they're not coming from the date dimension. They're actually coming from this report through column from the selector for the through date. So this is illustrating how when the user makes that selection, it provides the context for through when, right? So I can select through March here, and I should see the same results as though we're going through March over here. Oh, I can't hold both at the same time. But the big difference here is we've added the concept of the last gift date now. So we're able to compare data through May 23rd. I did skip something. You might be sitting here saying, but wait a minute, that calculation group and this calculated item, it's just using this thing called selected MMDD. How did you actually get that? Let's take a step back and get there. So in your file, you can locate the selected MMDD to see how this is compiled. You shrink this down a little bit. We have to take a few steps. I'll also mention that in your DAX measures, a lot of times it's necessary to turn a measure into a variable and then reference that variable, not only because it's more convenient to reference a short variable name, but sometimes it's just plain required. So we've got the concept of identifying the selected MMDD value, which is we're going to use the selected value expression. What that means is if we can identify one specific value from this table selector through date, one specific record there that was selected, then we can identify the selected value for that field that was called fiscal MMDD start of month. Remember that's values 100, 200, 300. So 100 is still special because it's just a placeholder. It's not yet set to 1123, but that's what our last gift date shows up as in that table. Now, if we cannot identify one specific record that's been selected, maybe we didn't set up our slicer to be single selection, or maybe we didn't add the slicer to the page yet, so nothing's been selected, then we'll treat it as though we're looking at the full year. Just give me all values less than 1,300. Of course, there's no values that are 1,300. We only go through December 31st or June 30th, right? So 11/30 or 12/30 is our max MMDD. I've become quite accustomed to thinking in MMDD like language over the past decade that I've been using this this technique. Let's see what's next here. Last gift date. So we do need to know what was the last gift date, and we can find that by looking at the max gift date in the gifts table, and we want to look across all dates, no filters on gift types or days or anything. Just look across all gifts and tell me the last gift date. Also, I'm going to add one because I know I'm going to use a less than symbol in a minute. All right. So once I know my last gift date, then I can calculate from the dim date. This is something that I love to do, and it took just a moment to realize that I can essentially do a lookup in my dim date table to find the value that I need. So in this case, I'm finding the max date. There's also related, I don't know, there's other ways, but I calculate my fiscal MMDD value that's associated with my dim date value that equals the date, month, and day of my last gift date. Now I had to make sure that I was stripping out any timestamp that might have been in there. So that's why you see the date put together in that way. All right, so once we have these two values, it all comes down simply to a selected MMDD, which is either values 100 through 1,300, and our last gift dates MMDD, which we know is 1123 plus 1, 1124. Then we can say if the user selected last gift date, then use 1124. Otherwise, use the value they selected, which was either 200 through 1,300. So hopefully that little walkthrough will help you in the future when you're ready to come back here and start to take and copy and write these expressions into your own workbook. Going to check for checking that Q&A. All right. Hi, Erica. Welcome. Yes, so the workbook that's available for download, it's using the Power BI connector. So if you've gone through the steps to create that connector and you're an RENXT user, you'll be able to refresh this workbook with your data. Otherwise, just use the workbook as a guideline for snippets that you can recreate. Hi, Haley. Oh, you like that calculation group? Yes, I can show that again. Let me check this next question. Okay. And we've answered the question about come to our Power BI user group, and we can answer additional questions there. We can go through this same workbook if we need to. So, Haley, I think your question is more about after we've created our time intelligence group and we've added items to it, which is all done in the model. I'll mention, get us caught up again. In our model, add a calculation group, new calculation group, right? Once we have it, we rename the items in it with a right click and a rename. We can add new calculations and we define them in the expressions. Once we've done that, then we're able to, in our visualization, here's my visualization, just simply drag that time intelligence group onto the visualization. So without time intelligence, everything's full year. Pull time intelligence in here, and I've got full year and selected year to date split out side by side. While we're here talking about calculation groups, I'll mention this revenue type. This is also a calculation group, and I'm just using the two values that are available here under revenue type as the options in a slicer. That's because received versus committed is not a one size fits all. I can't just say for each gift whether it was received or committed, because our one-time cash donations might count for both, right? And so whenever I have a piece that can't be distinctly apply, have one value distinctly applied, and I need this gray area of overlap, we define the business rules for received and the business rules for committed as two calculation items. And now we're able to flip back and forth between those rules on our report. Okay, we're ready for visualizations. I'm going to take my template page again and duplicate it. And this one's charts, all about charts. And in this case, we are going to continue using our report through calculation. I want to give you some tips about getting over issues you might encounter with a gauge chart. So I'm adding a gauge. But even before we do that, let's take a look. Let's take a walk through. Here's our gauge. It's telling us our, and here's our report through. Let me put it up here. So through last gift date, we have 1585 donors through May 23rd of this year. We want to compare that to last year. On my gauge, all I've got is a target. Now the target I've set is, I want to know where we ended last year, and I want to increase above last year, theoretically. This demo data is not on track, being 11 months into the fiscal year already. But theoretically, I want to do 10% more than last year. So I'll walk you through how to put that target value on here. At this point, where am I compared to same period last year? I can hover to see that in the tooltips. I've chosen to add the prior year value to the tooltips and the percent diff to the tooltips. So that's about as far as a gauge is going to take us. Now, because I was a little bit, I wasn't fully satisfied by that. I wanted to visually see how close I am to last year. And that's why we're going to take a step further to look at a bullet chart option where we've got this shading. This shading here, the dark blue is representing same period last year, and the light blue is representing where last year ended, and then the target is 10% above that. Unfortunately, in the gauge chart or the bullet chart, we'll find we don't have the same flexibility in our tooltips. The best we can do is rename these two items of the actual value and the target. And so these are some trade-offs. But let's talk through our gauge chart to start with. Got my gauge. I know I want to show count donors. And of course, this is just count donors across all time. I haven't applied any filters yet. Let's filter to the current fiscal year first and foremost. So my fiscal year, I'm going to use the fiscal year offset here. I mentioned that I was going to show you an alternative to using the top in. So in my date dimension, I have a field called fiscal year offset that, nope, not top. I said we're not doing top. Basic filtering to show you what I've got. 0 represents the current year. So the prior year is -1 and so forth. We've got 25 years of data here and we have nothing in the future in my date dimension. Now your date dimension might step into the future so that you have value 1 representing next year and 2 years forward and so on. When I select 0, we're talking about this year, you're seeing a familiar number. Okay. Now, here's the thing that I don't like about the rainbow. When I choose, let's say we're starting at the beginning of the year, it's July. Oh, guys, what have I forgotten? My slicer's not doing anything. Oh no, I'm broken, right? I haven't leveraged our time intelligence group. I need to add that as a filter here so that we're applying that business rule of selected year to date. All right, so here's July, 606 donors through the end of July, 762 donors through the end of August. Okay, September, but what is not visually informative? This rainbow is always just in the halfway point. This value here, this max value, it's not informative. Power BI is automatically just calculating it as twice the value that's on display. So this is the first thing I wanted to point out about the gauge, that it can be frustrating when you want it to be visually informative. But you might be sitting here thinking, well, if we just put our target value, then surely Power BI will know what our max should be. So let's try that. Give it the benefit of the doubt here and try it out. You hear my skepticism. I have created a target. Let's talk about the expression for a moment. As I said to you, I want that target to be where the prior year ended plus 10%. So prior year times 1.1 is a 10% increase over the prior year end. But what you really need to know is, how did I calculate the prior year end? So take a look at our expression there. Count donors for the prior year end. I wrapped a calculate business rule around simply counting donors for the prior year. And what I'm using here, the trick, is the expression remove filters, and I'm removing filters on that fiscal MMDD. Because of course, the rule we applied when we used the selected year-to-date calculation item was fiscal MMDD must be less than the value selected. So I'm saying, forget about that. Don't apply any filter on fiscal MMDD because I need the full year, right? All right, so that's giving us our prior year end, and our count donors target is what we want to add as our target value in this gauge. Here's our target value. Let's drag it on. I don't see it. And that's because it's greater than the maximum value that Power BI automatically calculated for us. So now we know that this gauge is not going to be useful until we tell it what that max value should be. And maximum value is available as a field right here. I have calculated this for us. Max gauge value, I'm going to drop it on here so that we can start seeing what's useful, then we'll come back and talk about it. Nope, we won't come back and talk about it because I just checked the time. We're not going to make it that far. Because I do have a presentation immediately after this one. Maybe I'll see you in Beginner's Guide to Power BI for Blackbaud CRM, hosted with Blackbaud Cloud Operations. All right, what we've got here is our target value, so that our target value is always going to show up at that point on the rainbow now. And you can see how much more informative this is as we move through the year until we get up to our current point. I haven't added those tooltips yet. You'll see that tooltips are available in the visualization at the end here. Tooltips, drop those in. And because we're running out of time, I'm just going to mention that the bullet chart is not available out of the box. You're going to have to get more visuals and explore the marketplace that's available. Type in bullet. Now, I choose to stick with things that have been published by the Microsoft Corporation. Others might have a fee associated with them. If they're free, then you'll certainly want to do due diligence to understand who's providing that and what's their motivation for making it free, right? So it is possible to get additional visualizations beyond what's available here out of the box. So I must stop there, check for final questions, and then get ready for my next session here. Do we have any unanswered Q&A yet? Looks good. Looking good, folks. Oh, thank you, Sunshine. Thank you. All right, guys. Download those materials. All right, well, hopefully I'll catch you all at the Power BI user group coming up shortly. I assume it's next week, but I haven't even looked at next week yet. But maybe I'll see you in the BBCRM and Power BI session immediately following. Bye, all.